3, 2, and 1. The main focus of this debate should be about how taxes are actually distributed equally, while also effectively across all sectors, because solely paying attention to the problem of inequality among the rich and the poor isn't actually what taxes should be about, and we'll explain further in the setup. But here, the main question that both sides are tackling in this debate is whether tax wealth really effective in terms of redistributing wealth and promote equality. Since on our side, we will focus on these goals and burdens. First of all, is that how countries attract better investors and don't face economic stagnation, and we'll also prove to you how the implementation of wealth taxes globally will not actually solve or do anything to the problem of inequality between the rich and the poor, as side proposition has aforementioned. First of all, on the setup, and then we'll move on to the rebuttals, right? On our side, we believe that rather than promoting the idea of wealth tax, we pursue the status quo that most countries have, which is the income tax. Because like the wealth tax, it's basically a levy on an individual's accumulated net assets. While income tax, it focuses on the money of a person or businesses that earns over a specific period of time. While income tax is very standard in most countries, wealth tax is way less common and often directed at a very high net worth individuals. For income tax, you pay tax based on the amount of money that you earn, or for example, your salary. And this is basically income tax is more straightforward and easier to implement, unlike wealth tax, since it directly taxes individuals on the income they receive over a period of time. And currently, it's already obvious that the wealthy, the rich, are paying way more taxes than the poor due to the high income they receive. And this actually works better since implementation and measurement becomes easier for the government and less people are actually confused about the procedure. When it comes to the wealth tax, it's way more confusing and a lot of people do not actually understand how wealth tax works. It's also very unlikely that the government or state authorities can fully track a person's net assets so that they can effectively pay this tax to the government. Now let's come straight to the rebuttals and clarification. First of all, they talked about the model of a globalized wealth tax mechanisms, and they also talked about how it's the utmost priority of taxes to, like, if we implement wealth taxes, it can actually reduce inequality. The problem here is that the rich will always find a way of getting out of things, right? Inequality will not be reduced if the rich hide their assets or move abroad. The idea sounds very good at first hand, like we take money from the rich, we distribute it, we give it to the poor, but in reality, it doesn't actually work that effectively. For example, a lot of countries have tried wealth tax and repealed from them simply because they drove away wealthy taxpayers and investors, and they actually had no measurable long-term effect on income or wealth inequality. Also, on the problem of inequality, we believe that inequality is very multidimensional, right? Because inequality is not just about money distribution or wealth distribution. It's also about education, healthcare, gender, technology, or other kinds of things that is not just all about money. If side proposition really want to solve the problem of inequality between the rich and the poor, solely focusing on wealth tax or the implementation of it will not actually solve the problem. And taxation cannot fix the structural inequality that is embedded in society. Even if government, they collect more, there's no guarantee that this money is effectively redistributed, especially in countries with like corruption or weak institutions. There's no guarantee that they can redistribute this money to the poor or to the people actually in need. Let's come to the argument in which our main claim here is on the implementation of wealth tax would significantly encourage capital flight or brain drain. Since capital flight refers to the rich or high-skilled workers moving to other countries because of more opportunities or even lower taxes, the implementation of wealth tax can encourage capital flight because they lower the net return on assets. It provides these workers an incentive for wealthy individuals to move their capital to other countries where they see that there's actually a lower tax. The mechanism here is that the countries actually find their capital lost and they're unable to attract investors. Since side proposition is basically unaware of this, since all they care about is inequality between the rich and the poor. However, the problem here is that society can never solve inequality. Therefore, it's our utmost ability, and it's like our utmost priority to take a different stance and try to solve the problem from another aspect, right? Because when it comes to capital flight, countries, they will face severe economic impact because workers or the wealth or high income group, they no longer want to work in a country where they are forever taxed just because they have better asset, just because they're richer, just because they're wealthier. It's not their fault. Also, it reduces entrepreneurship or investment because when capital they exits a country, they are no longer there. There are few resources available for like domestic investment, and it's obvious that it can lead to slower economic growth as well. It can significantly reduce innovation and job creation. This is the most important and detrimental impact that side proposition is now facing. On our side, we propose a better solution, which we have mentioned before. We propose that it's better to still keep the status quo and have the income tax, since number one, we should better encourage wealth redistribution through social spending instead of a global taxation system that side proposition mentions, right? Instead, we should encourage them to redistribute their money through social spending or through investment in the healthcare systems or education, rather than a global taxation with no clear or detailed reporting on how the government is going to redistribute these types of money. Also, income tax aforementioned is more straightforward, it's better to implement, and people are better adhered to those since they don't have to keep asking questions on how much tax should they pay or whether this is fair to them personally. So therefore, on our side, we strongly oppose the motion that this House would mandate the implementation of wealth taxes globally. Not only will this affect the entire economy, not only will this affect the high-skilled workers, but also exacerbate the problem of inequality in the status quo. Very proud to oppose.